Thanks everyone. Good to see everyone out there, and Happy New Year. And I know it's been continuing to be an unprecedented time, and we continue to be physically distanced but socially connecting this way. And I know there's been a lot of stress and craziness in the news. So, be kind to yourself out there. And, if you're struggling, reach out to someone, to get some help. And even, shouting out to our caregivers as well, who I know are sort of stuck indoors, taking care of our beloved patients. So, definitely get the help you need, take good care of yourselves, treat yourself a little bit, be kind even to yourselves. So definitely, start the year out right. And we're excited to bring you Ben Stecher back, who we've met in the last series of talks. I think he's been on twice at this point. Really great speaker and part of the Parkinson's disease Avengers. And we'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute. Maybe Ben can describe his role there. And Ben is just an inspiration. He's just taught me a lot about advocacy, and through his work as a patient who was young, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's, but also a thought leader and research advocate, an educator, just a tremendous gift to all of us in the Parkinson's community. So I'm excited to have talked Ben into hopefully co-hosting some of the sessions this year with me. He has basically self-taught himself a lot about the science behind treatments in Parkinson's, and written this amazing book with Alberto Espai, who's a colleague of ours, called Brain Matters, and he'll tell you a little bit about that too, trying to understand a little bit about what Parkinson's is and what it isn't. And so I'm excited to sort of start the year off with talking to Ben a little bit about a topic that's near and dear to him, which is largely around exercise and its effects on the body, as well as sort of the mind and body connection, which has been a passion of mine. As many of you know, I've got this yoga interest and mindfulness interest. And I think, I was trying to sort of think about what we should offer this year to our patients and caregivers out there, and sort of realigning the topics a little bit. And I think we've covered a lot of meat and potatoes of symptoms and treatments, and a lot of doctors, and folks. But I think this year we'll be focusing, I think from my perspective, on perhaps some of the wellness, a little bit more on yoga and mindfulness, because that's a passion of mine. Hopefully some mental health sort of resources, because I think that this is a big sort of deal that we're all going through in terms of being disconnected, and the trauma of COVID is, I think, taking its toll on each and every one of us, with or without Parkinson's out there. Certainly my healthcare provider colleagues are really struggling out there as well. So getting maybe some more psychologists on, and social workers, and some other folks maybe this year. And then also, sort of learning maybe with Ben about some of the basic science topics, and trying to break down some of the topics a little bit for folks out there and me, because I don't have a huge basic science background either. So trying to learn about the current therapies and what's in the pipeline. So that's kind of my thoughts. But if you have other ideas of speakers, feed them back to Andrea and the PMD Alliance. And they've been very fun to work with, and very open to hearing from both my side as well as the patients and their loved ones. So please write an email and give us feedback as well. So with that said, Ben, how are you doing over there? He's joining us from Toronto, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about sort of your thoughts on the new year, and maybe bring us up to date a little bit on the Brain Matters. Sorry, the book that you guys wrote, as well as the other sort of work that you've been doing out there in the world of wellness and Parkinson's.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Thank you to the PMD Alliance. Thank you, Indu, for inviting me. Looking forward to what will hopefully be a better year ahead. 2020 was a challenging year, I think, for everybody involved, for me as well. I started out the year in Cincinnati, doing some work with Alberto Espai, as you mentioned there, on something called the CCBP. And I had to I'm still kind of engaged with them, and I'm still trying to do what I can to help them along. But I had to shift my residency a little bit, and to shift my focus a little bit to some other things as well. The pandemic and all that went into 2020 forced, I think, everybody to adapt to a new reality. And I think it challenged us all to kind of explore new boundaries and explore new ways of adapting to these unprecedented times that we all live in. Unfortunately, that's a word that we've heard too much of this past year. And it seems like something that might continue to be part of our present day. But it is something that I think, oddly enough, people with Parkinson's have a lot of experience with prior to all this craziness that went before us. I think that for a lot of different reasons, we've had to learn how to adapt to ever-changing realities, ever-changing circumstances since our diagnosis. So in some ways, Parkinson's prepared us for all the 2020 rot. Although at the same time, it was definitely a big struggle for a lot of people. One of the worst things that you can do to somebody with Parkinson's is isolate them and disconnect them from the people that they know, from the classes that they attend, from the exercises that they are used to, from the routines that they're accustomed to, and from all the social connections that they have. So it's been a struggle. I've felt it myself. It's something that has been a constant source of I don't want to say anguish per se, but it's just something that is just constantly on the tip of everyone's minds, I think. And in my role here as a patient advisor to the clinic in Toronto, it's something that we've been struggling with as well. How to actually help all of the people in their homes as they try to deal with all of the changing circumstances, with the isolation and with everything that goes into living with this disease at the same time. So it's been a struggle, but I think it's also been an important learning experience for everybody involved. I think everyone's come through it, well, for the most part anyways. People have figured out ways to adapt, and it's been a learning experience for all involved. But I'm looking forward to learning more from all of you as well about about some of the things that you've done to adapt to these circumstances, and all of the ways in which you can help inspire others to be a part of some of the exciting things that are still happening in the world of Parkinson's and in the world of research and all of the things that go into living and adapting day by day to the changing circumstances that we live in. So kind of a broken record at this point, but yeah, I think that was a smorgasbord of different thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. I think we're all just trying to, go live by day right now. But I think that's a good idea, actually. Maybe we could have, as part of the chat, people could just sort of enter maybe what they're doing for their wellness or self-care. What's the number one thing that people are doing to kind of get through these days? Maybe people could type that in there as we're talking about, sort of some of the things that you're doing, Ben, to keep, keep fit, keep mentally active and things like that. And the other thing that I think I didn't mention as we're exploring things this year is, in talking about the mental health, and not just to be all doom and gloom, I really want to sort of put a positive spin on things too. I think hopefully we can bring some positivity to each other here. Often turning on the news, there's a lot of negative sort of feedback that we get. And I think, hopefully this can be a space where we can try to be each other's cheerleaders a little bit positive, try to bring some positive spin on things and learn from each other about what's working. And also, I really have, in the 70 plus interviews that we did, and we can reference those and put the links and people can watch them. I think what I was inspired by was sort of what people thought was their secret sauce for, success is doctors who take care of these patients, all day. What they sort of saw as the reason that people succeed. And then also as patients and the Avengers and different people have come on, what they each have learned kind of living with this is sort of tips for success. And so hopefully, Ben, you can share some of that with us here. And I think we're seeing a mounting, I'll just read out a couple of things that people have written here. Online support groups, that's good. And then meeting a friend for walking, some cardio, qigong, hiking, boxing, daily exercise, online PD warrior, exercise and spiritual practices. So lots of exercise, cycling, yoga on Zoom, Tai Chi, cooking together, walking in the neighborhood, hiking every day. So it looks like lots of people are walking, getting out in nature and trying to connect with people, socially distanced, of course. And somebody wrote here, when Ben speaks, the sun shines brighter, which is very sweet. So so Ben, maybe you could tell us a little bit about sort of what I know you've put together some inspiring thoughts on exercise, and just so people know, maybe teach us a little bit about, Ben, your journey, because I know you've spent some time, in Cleveland, but or in Cincinnati, but you also traveled, I think, all over, was it this continent or all over the world, trying to seek out some people who are doing research and going to meetings and trying to network really with honestly the who's who of Parkinson's. And you've become now a resource for me to like, find a speaker in this or who's the best person for that. So tell us a little bit about how you did that and kind of why you did that.
Yeah, so part of my own coping strategy. So one of the things that I realized early on after my diagnosis is that the biggest troubling part of this that I had was that I had just no idea about what was going on in my brain. And I had no understanding of the basic research that was going on that might offer new therapies in the future. So I sought to understand all of these things. And I thought, how could I actually get all the knowledge that I need to be able to understand so I can cope with living with this disease? I debated about whether or not I should go back to school and maybe pursue a medical degree or something of that sort. But I realized early on that I needed a more, because the disease was obviously imposing a lot of restrictions on me. So I wanted a more accelerated route to getting that knowledge. So I started traveling from one research center to another, asking questions, being a nuisance to some of these researchers, and really just prodding away and seeing what they had to teach me about my brain and the science behind some of the therapies that were coming online. And I ended up traveling throughout North America, Europe, Israel a little bit of East Asia, and Canada as well. Just interviewing people, getting to know some of the researchers, getting to know some of the people, getting to know some of the basic science that was going on, and just trying to get to as good of an understanding as I could so I could make the best decisions for myself. I was also spurred on, obviously, by just my innate curiosity for these things and for the brain. I had no formal background in biology or the sciences, but I picked it up along the way. I read a lot of papers. I started to write some papers as well, and I got to know some of the researchers as well. And I found it very well. At the beginning, it can be a little bit intimidating to try to reach out to some of these people and engage with them. I find that once you kind of break through that initial barrier, a lot of scientists are very eager to talk to somebody about their research and what they're working on. So once you can kind of speak their language a little bit, they do open up a bit, and it does become a source of knowledge and also inspiration to me. I mean, just yesterday, or was it 2 days ago, we heard an announcement from a company called Blue Rock Therapeutics. That's a stem cell research company that is now going into clinic for the first time. So there's all sorts of new things to be excited about and all sorts of new therapies in the pipeline that give me inspiration anyways to keep going, keep pursuing the daily grind that Parkinson's does impose on you.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, what a journey. And it sounds like, I mean, it is daunting, even as a young, clinician, and, I don't look like your average neurologist. So sometimes for me, it's a bit daunting to go up to someone who's a thought leader and, has like white hair and looks very different than me, written 10 textbooks and ask them a question. But I think I personally found, and hopefully I've brought to you all out there in the last, 70 plus interviews, how honestly, I think collaborative and open and fun and funny, many of these clinicians are, and researchers, and just how honestly passionate they are about trying to help people with this disease and hungry to learn from the patients as well. And it's just been inspiring to me. I literally, every single person I've asked has dropped whatever they're doing and made an hour available. And this is, no matter who it is. So I think, we're very lucky to work with so many top, minds, and everyone's working, I think, quite well together. And I think COVID, in some ways, one of the silver linings is that, through this type of technology, we can literally, bring, a world expert in anything, to us and ask questions. So that's great. And I'm glad that you were able to, share about your kind of journey there. So tell us a little bit about kind of what your sense of, what are you doing these days? And I think Hugh's already written, Hugh's got on here. Hi, Ben, Hugh here. Can you tell us more about how the brain gym, so much more than just the exercise component? So maybe without further ado, I'll let you, and people continue, please, to write, because I'm finding out so much great stuff. And we'll maybe just take a second here to read some of the things that people have written just as we go, because otherwise it'll be too much to do at the end. But I saw here that there's somebody written a new CD of his music and then re-released an older CD called Tremors. And then a support group weekly, a lot of people doing support groups, some people who are doing, meditation, some pool stuff, in some places doing some art, saturating myself with PMD offerings, which is great. People doing yoga, PD big and loud. There's a question about free weights. Are they good as an exercise for PD? So maybe Ben, you can mention that. Some gardening. People are doing twice monthly socials on Zoom, boxing, running, weightlifting, dancing, bar classes. Radhika is calling one person every day and have a conversation and saying hello. Disciplined on using the smartphone, which is really great. So you almost schedule that in just so that we don't miss it. And then exercise, mosaics, quilting, game day, to mention a few. And then somebody asked about online PD Warrior. I don't know too much about that. If anyone wants to, the PD Warrior people, if they're on, maybe can mention, or Ben, I don't know if you know about that. And then poetry. People are asking if it's being recorded. Yes, it is. And yeah, so these are all the types of things that are going on. So not to distract from what you're about to say, Ben, but it sounds like we're getting some great ideas here too. And so if you don't mind just talking about the free weights and mentioning what he was talking about the more sort of holistic approach in the PD gym, I'd love it.
Sure. So the best medicine I've found for this disease is exercise. There's nothing that quite beats getting a good sweat in and getting a good, feeling your muscles really activate and really just exerting yourself as much as you possibly can. And I've found a bunch of different tools that have helped, but it's been a learning process, and it continues to be a learning process throughout. Also because, as anyone with Parkinson's knows, not only is every day different, but sometimes moment to moments are different. So really it's all about understanding where you are at any present moment and adapting to that situation. I mean, a basic example is the on-off cycles that we go through. There are certain exercises that work better for me when I'm on, and certain exercises work better for me when I'm off. And so I've had to learn which ones to do at which times. Not only that, but there's also just little daily things that I've picked up that help me kind of move a little bit better, or help me just do any particular activity a little bit better. And something as simple as this. I don't know if you can make it out clearly.
Yeah, you can see it.
I think it's called a tactile ring. And it's kind of sharp, and it kind of, it's very pointy. But what I found is that if you have that kind of constant sensory feedback coming from your hand, it helps activate it, it helps loosen it up a little bit. I also found this little thing. This is a Hanukkah toy that I stole from my niece and nephew. And I found for one reason or another that just having it around my finger and swinging it around produces that kind of feedback loop as well in my brain that helps loosen me up a little bit, that helps me do some of the things I want to do a little bit more fluidly. And I'm talking to people with Parkinson's. I mean, I'm sure people have seen some of the videos of people on bicycles that can't really walk properly, but somehow they can bike for miles and miles and miles on end. There are all sorts of little tricks that people with Parkinson's have picked up along the way that help them move about or do things a little bit better in their daily lives. And I'd love to hear from all of you what sorts of tricks you've picked up that might help you navigate the world a little bit better. And working with Hugh Johnson, who you just mentioned, we've tried to compile some of these ideas together into what we're calling the brain gym. So a bunch of just exercises and routines that help people just live and move a little bit more fluidly through the world.
Very cool. Somebody asked what the ring is called again. So you said it's a tactile ring, you think?
I think it's called the Tactile Ring.
Okay.
Or a sensory like feedback ring or something like that.
Okay. Well, we'll take a look and we'll see if we can find it and post it here if we find it. So, and Lori writes, her husband discovered that fiddling with small tube or bottle cap helps his tremors. So.
Yeah, and even things like this little slinky thing here, it really helps to get that range of motion in, and just having that sensory feedback from your fingers all the way through your arms. There are all sorts of little things like that. Also from Hugh Johnson as well, I picked up this thing here, a guitar, and I try to pluck at that and play it when I can. Not only does it help with the dexterity of my fingers a little bit, but something else that I've figured out as well, or something else that I've found anyways, is that learning new skills, whether it be an instrument or a language or cooking, whatever it might be, helps to keep you activated, helps to keep your brain a little bit more mentally focused, and just helps you to, in all sorts of ways. It also gives you like a lot of positive feedback, just knowing that you're learning something new, and that just keeps you going, I think, throughout the day.
That's amazing. So, so you really think that the sort of sensory feedback makes a difference for you? It sounds like, touching something in your hand, having certain types of textures, maybe makes sort of plays a trick on the brain to maybe do something.
Yeah, and of all the exercises that I've done, the one that I think undoubtedly helps the most is swimming. And I think that's because you're in the water, you have all that sensory feedback coming from your skin. Um, I don't think anyone's been able to properly explain it. I've talked to my neurologist, Alfonso Fasano, about this quite a bit. There's a lot of theories out there about why these things work and how they might work, but none of those theories really encapsulated it completely. Bottom line is science just isn't quite there yet to really understand why some of these things work. But what's important is not necessarily why they work, it's that they work. So sometimes I think people can get a little bit bogged down in trying to explain all the little details about why everything works, when really all we really care about is finding things that do work.
Yeah. And people have mentioned here that the X-ray apron, so that sort of weight on there is something that they found soothing, and also calming. And then also there has been some questions about weighted blankets as well. And, certainly I've been doing a lot of work in the yoga mindfulness space, and there's some practices, and we're hoping to make some videos on these with just grounding practices. And if you look at Matthew Sanford, who's an amazing yoga teacher, talks about, just sort of placing your hands on the table, to kind of feel, and there's definitely a little bit of science building on sort of this sensory input being grounding and sort of taking things maybe out of your head and maybe having this sort of tactile experience, sort of shifting sort of where the feedback loops are going, and maybe, kind of calming people down or putting them in a different place. So I don't think this is just all that hokey. I think we may not have the science proof, but I definitely have seen it. And so I think these are some really cool things. And people have been talking here about a few other sorts of things. And then the music, of course, which can kind of get you again out of, sort of whatever focus, and maybe, auditorily kind of changing the pace a little bit and having a different place to focus. So, and then people have talked a little bit about visualization and hypnosis as well. So I think, lots of different sensory sort of tricks to be kind of changing it up a little bit. But so Ben, in terms of what you do, let's see. So tell us a little bit about your sort of palette of wellness, let's say. And I think some of this it sounds like maybe things that you like, things that you've just realized kind of help you. Some of this is probably from science and exploring some of the things that you've talked about through this series of interviews. But maybe tell us a little bit about, the importance for you of your diet, maybe what you're eating, your sleep patterns, maybe a little bit about sort of any mind-body practices that you do, the exercise, and we can break that down. And I know you made some cool videos as well, so we can, love to see some of that. But maybe tell us sort of about the sort of holistic package that you sort of drizzle in from a lifestyle perspective. Would you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, sure. So all of those things you mentioned are very important. They're as important as basically as any other part of this therapy routine that everyone kind of builds for themselves. In particular, I think the most important for me anyways is really the mindfulness practice, spending a little bit of time each day, just orienting yourself in the world. For me, that comes from, in many ways, the science that I've learned has really helped orient that as well. Just understanding yourself as a kind of a thinking, living thing, breathing thing in this world that tries to make sense of it all, but at the same time, just constantly remembering what and who you are. So what it's the big realization that I had at some point, as I learned a little bit more about the neuroscience and I learned a little bit more about the biology, that really fed into my wellness and to my mindfulness practices as well, is that I learned that even though that there's a few things going wrong deep inside my brain that sometimes make some of the movements and some of the things that I do in life a little bit more awkward, the amount of things going right at any given moment is astounding. I mean, 99.999% of all the biological pathways and all the chemical reactions going on in my body are happening perfectly, that allow me to have this experience, that allow me to live and talk to all of you right now. And just keeping that in mind, that even though there are certain things that make life a little bit more challenging, just being able to there's so much going right at any given moment that allows you to just have this experience at all. That just is really what makes life. So that more than anything else has really helped me on a daily basis. And then on top of all of that, it's the diet, the exercise, the social connections, the trying to make a difference in the world as well, make a positive change. All of those things play into the complete package that is wellness, and that is, coping with and living with a disease like Parkinson's. Yeah.
What kind of diet do you try to eat? I know it's harder than not. Do you believe that there's a specific diet that has worked for you?
So lately I found that cutting out sugar almost completely has been very beneficial for me. In the past, I've tried, ketogenic diets, vegetarian diets, all sorts of other things. Some of them are a little bit more difficult to stick to than anything else. In the end, it's kind of like exercise as well. You have to do what you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it very much, you're probably not going to stick to it. You have to find something that offers the right kind of balance that allows you to continue to live the life that you want to live and continue to enjoy the things that you enjoy, but that doesn't do too much harm to your body as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think in general, I think from reading all the literature and stuff, I think largely Mediterranean diet, as much fresh fruits and vegetables, some fiber, hydration. I see you drinking water right there as I said the word hydration. That was like it was planned, but I think that, hydration is super important. How much water do you drink a day?
I go through at least 5 or 6 of these a day.
Wow. That's a lot. So for those of you out there, and Ben lives in Toronto, like near Toronto, but I mean, I know we have a lot of folks joining us from the desert, California, Arizona and stuff. So hydration is definitely very important. That's very key. And how much sleep do you get, Ben? How much do you try to get?
So I'm usually able to get about 7 or 8 hours of sleep a day. Sometimes sometimes it's not quite that much. And that I think has a direct benefit. I mean, you can feel it very directly. If you don't sleep properly, the day is usually shot. The medication isn't as effective. You make, I think, poor decisions throughout the day. So it all cascades from a lack of sleep. So getting enough sleep, making sure that you are well rested is the start to any good day.
Absolutely. And how, I think your positive attitude has such a big sort of contributor here to how things are going with you, obviously. And that reframe, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, Ben, because I think that, sort of one gets a diagnosis and you got it. How old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was 29.
Okay. And how many years have you had Parkinson's at this point?
7 years.
So there's probably a time when you were kind of adjusting to things, and then, sort of you just said a very profound, I think, statement of reframing, which I think is really so important, and how I also try to live my life as best I can is to sort of, rather than focusing on the things that are going wrong or the negatives, try to sort of pivot and shift it to reframe, sort of the positives, and it's much easier said than done. But I think what you said was really beautiful. So when did you kind of shift that mindset, and how much do you think attitude has to do with the success of your?
So definitely at the beginning, I kind of cast Parkinson's aside. One, I didn't really understand what it meant. I didn't know what it would mean for my future. So I just kind of pushed it to the side and didn't think too much of it. Then, all of this knowledge that I've kind of built up around it is a double-edged sword, because it can be, understanding the reality of what is in my future and what I'm going through is tough. But it's given me the basis that I need to cope with what I'm going through, to understand what I'm going through, and to be able to make the right decisions, I think, or try to make as many of the right decisions as I can on a daily basis. But there is definitely a period at the beginning of anyone's diagnosis where they just don't want to deal with it. And I see, maybe this is a misrepresentation just from the people that I see on my screen, but I get the sense that people only start taking this seriously once it becomes a little bit more debilitating for them. And that's something that it's a hard window to break through. And again, I'd love to hear from all of you. What would it have taken for you when you were early on diagnosed to really start focusing on it, to attend something, to even attend a talk like this? I know in my first year or 2, maybe even 3 years after being diagnosed, I probably would never have come on to this kind of talk. I would have felt like this wasn't for me. I wasn't experiencing a lot of these symptoms that other people were experiencing. So it's a tough thing to try to get somebody to start taking it seriously before it becomes, a big detriment to their lives.
Yeah, I think that is true. And I was just speaking to a colleague of yours out in Canada who runs, I think, Parkinson's Canada or something like that, and so he said the same thing. It was like, getting the patients to come to the support groups. There's sort of this gap between, when they're seen in an office by a doctor, given the diagnosis. And then I'm assuming that some doctors are offering a support group, and it takes a while for somebody to accept that sort of path. And maybe it's because we misspeak about what support groups are, and that you need to be really sick in order to get something out of them, or you need to be at a certain stage of the illness to get something from them. But I think, having a sense of how diverse the groups can be, and there are groups just for young onset patients sometimes, and veterans, and I think if you can cater it to the population, it's definitely helpful. But I agree. I think there is sort of this shift that needs to happen where people are open to getting sort of connected and resources, and then also probably owning sort of the wellness and lifestyle piece, and waking up in the morning and kind of thinking that they're have some sense of control over what their outcome is, and I think some part of that is hugely part of why you do this brain gym, right? I mean, it's like, what is that sort of, when you wake up in the morning, what is that sort of feeling that I'm assuming that you, like me, don't wake up wanting to exercise every day and jump out of bed and go do it, right? Like, what is the sort of path to overcoming the apathy or the fatigue or whatever it is? Like, what do you say to yourself, and what are the strategies that have helped you kind of sustain this?
So yeah, at the beginning, I was not a big fan of exercise. I mean, I would do it from time to time, but it did take a while for it to become part of my daily routine. And it's hard to say what exactly is like the thing that I tell myself. It's gotten to the point now where I enjoy the exercise. I like the feeling of being tired, of having my muscles ache, of having, of breathing heavily. Like it's a good feeling. Like you feel like all of the endorphins being released. You can almost feel like the neurotrophic factors flowing through your brain and your body. It's something that's become fun to do, but it definitely didn't start off that way. It definitely takes a long time to build up to that. Now it doesn't take much for me to try to do some exercise, but at the beginning, or earlier on, I guess I should say, it was really, I mean, it's each day is a little bit different. Sometimes it's almost out of fear that you do it, because it's something that you're supposed to do. It's something that if you don't do it, bad things will happen to you. Now fear can be a good thing. It can be a good driver. It can make you do positive things. But ideally, I think you want to do things for positive reasons. And I mean, I think we all have an innate understanding that exercise is good for us. But getting to the point where you actually actualize on that on a daily basis, it's just a matter of, mind over matter in some degree, like ensuring that you not only understand why it's important, but getting your body to do it on a daily basis is something that just requires a mental shift, I guess, in how you live and how you go about the world. I mean, we all have parents or siblings or loved ones that we try to get to do certain hobbies that are good for them, but it's not always easy to convince somebody to do what's in their best interest, especially if it's something that they aren't accustomed to doing, is something that they don't want to do. It's a challenge. It's a struggle for everybody. I think this goes well beyond just having Parkinson's. It's really a matter of living. I mean, I'm sure you all have somebody that that you wish was doing something on a daily basis that they're not doing. It's tough to get them to do those things. And you don't want to be a nuisance. You don't want to nag. You don't want to be too much of a bother to them. But you try to nudge and influence and push them in whatever ways you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is one of the interesting things about exercise, isn't it? It sort of like takes a while to kind of see that flow, but once you get into the feeling of doing it on a regular basis, you do miss it. And I never thought I would be that person either, that would miss sort of the feeling of getting, a good workout in and sort of the positive effects. But I think it does take sort of getting over a hump. And then once you get derailed, it's sort of like, you kind of need to get sort of reoriented and then get back into the flow. And there's probably a few days or weeks that kind of get you back into it. And then, there's these humps again that can kind of derail you. And I think that's even, for me without Parkinson's, but certainly the non-motor issues in Parkinson's can certainly get in the way of, being able to comply, things like, fatigue or apathy, things like that, depression sometimes. And so, I think it is definitely a struggle. So it's great to hear, what works for people. Thanks for sharing that. So tell us a little bit more about the brain gym and what exactly it is. What are the sort of exercises and things like that? Maybe you can kind of teach us a little bit about that.
Okay, so it's really a series of exercises that I found that help me overcome some of the symptoms that I experience. So my main struggles, my main symptoms are tremor, rigidity, dyskinesia at times when I'm a little bit too on, and bradykinesia as well. And I found that there are just different movements, different patterns, different things that you can do. And maybe this is a good time to show the video that I have.
Yeah, people have asked, like, is it an actual place or is it a metaphor?
So for now, it is a metaphor. I'm hoping eventually to turn it into a real place, but we're not quite there yet. So here is one of the tools that so early on in the pandemic, as I said before, I was in Cincinnati, then I came back to Toronto to my parents' home, and I realized that I needed to outfit myself with all of the equipment that I was going to need to get through this pandemic. So here are some of the tools that I've picked up that helped me, that helped me on a daily basis. So the first one is a recumbent bicycle. This is very good when you're off, and most of these exercises that I'm going to show you I did when I was in off state. So I wasn't able to walk very well, but these bikes, and whoops, what happened? That's the wrong video. There we go. So here's the guitar. So I'll speed through that one a little bit. The guitar really helps with your fingers, with dexterity, with just plucking at something. So what the brain gym tries to do is just try to break down each of the different symptoms that we struggle with and figure out what works for each one. This machine I found to be very good. Something about like pushing on the feet pedestals that you have there and pulling on the handle there really allows you to move regardless of how your symptoms are treating you at the time. So I found these rowing machines to just be a very good tool for overcoming a variety of different challenges and symptoms. It also has a dynamic resistance. So depending on how strongly you pull, it pulls you back. So it really allows you to adapt to any situation or time. The spin bike is also great, especially one that has a lot of variable speeds to it. So you can really adjust the amount of resistance that you get, and you can really tune it to exactly how you're feeling at any given moment. The next one is one that I've had a lot of fun with. So this boxing equipment, it's a band that you put on your head, and then there's a string attached to a ball, and you just punch your way. You punch the tennis ball, and I found it to just be very good for just like activating a variety of different senses. For one reason or another, just having that hand-eye coordination in place really helps to activate a variety of different pathways.
Is the video playing right? Yep, there you go.
So this one I found to just be very beneficial for in a variety of different circumstances. And the next one, so that's this stringy thing that I talked about before. So you can see that I'm a little bit, so my leg is a little bit shaky here, but it still helps with the range of motion, just really stretching everything out. What happens to a lot of people with Parkinson's, especially over time, is that their range of motion just shrinks. And this is something that is emphasized a lot with the power movements, if people are familiar with those. Just making sure that you open up your shoulders, open up your muscles, and really just stretch out as far as you can. Here, this is good for the core. For a lot of these though, and something I want to emphasize as well, the most important thing is to make sure you do them safely. So don't push yourself beyond what your limits are. The worst thing that you can do is hurt yourself, because then if you're not able to exercise at all, that's when you often make that's when the disease really catches up with you. So it's just getting to those moments where you can feel free to exercise comfortably and safely. Yoga, I found to be very helpful. It helps with flexibility, strength, and all sorts of different ways of just opening up the body and making sure that you're as flexible and as lithe as you possibly can be.
Hughes asked, what happens to your rigidity when you're doing some of these exercises?
So that, I don't want to say like they miraculously go away, but you suddenly just loosen up a little bit. You feel your body, you feel like a lot of the tension leaving from your body. You just feel much more relaxed and much more at ease to move and to do some of these things. And then combining different exercises like here. Balance exercises with hand-eye coordination, that I found to be very beneficial as well. Just trying to combine as many different things, as many different kinds of sensory feedbacks and trying to activate as many different kinds of pathways as possible. This machine actually has been really good. So you can see it's not powered in any way. You have to power it yourself. And there's something about just having to push down on that surface and just power it yourself that, for one reason or another that I can't explain, really helps to activate and loosen things up, and helps with a variety of different motions and movements. And then, of course, to stretch and actually this is one that I found to be particularly important, is doing a lot of back exercises, a lot of back stretching exercises, making sure that your back is flexible and fluid and able to move in a variety of different ways. And you see I have that little thing on my finger as well. Just keeping that thing dangling for whatever reason, or just spinning it around, really helps to do a lot of these exercises a little bit more fluidly. And then again, just some yoga poses, some other stretches. All of it plays a role. But what I found and what I think is important to understand is that each person needs to adapt to their own body, to their own situation, to their own circumstances. What works for me is not necessarily going to work for anybody else. These are just the things that I found that help me feel a little bit better, be a little bit more flexible, be a little bit stronger, and enable me to do as many of the things that I'd like to do as possible. And that's basically the end of it there.
That's really cool. So there's been a couple questions here. I mean, I think, one of the comments is that it looks like a pretty expensive setup for, your average patient, which we totally understand. And certainly, everyone's different in terms of their resources and stuff like that. But I think you really showed us some things that are quite inexpensive, this little ball thingy on your finger. Do you know what that's called? People want to know where to get that.
Thing?
Well, is that the one that you were punching? No.
No, the ball thing on my finger, it's called, I don't know, I just looked it up. I can look it up online and send it later.
Yeah, we'll link the resources at the end of all of this, and when we link the video, we'll definitely get Ben to give us some of his resources if he finds them, not to promote any one company or whatever, but I think you've shown us some really unique kind of things that I haven't personally seen. So we'd love to get that information. Yeah, so yeah, I think the sort of sense is that, the ball thingy, the roller that you use, even the sort of dome shape thing, all relatively inexpensive. I think, getting a yoga mat down on the floor is definitely not too pricey. So I think there's definitely strategies if you can't afford, a spin bike or, expensive equipment. And people have talked about possibly getting things off of other, I guess, Craigslist or whatever, that might be a little bit more, sort of used equipment, although it's hard to know how safe some of those things are. I think you just want to make sure that anything you get, use safety first, because we absolutely agree as doctors that we don't want anyone to get injured in doing any of this. So, and then do you try to exercise when you're off, or do you try to do exercise? Are there certain exercises that you mentioned this at the beginning? So sometimes you try to exercise in the off state maybe, and then other times you try to wait until your medications are optimized to exercise. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I try to do them both as much as I can, because we want to be able to live regardless of whether we're off or on. We need to be able to adapt to each scenario. And again, there are certain exercises that just work better when I'm off. Like the amount of resistance that I'll tune on the bike is very different if I'm off versus when I'm on. Yeah, every part of it becomes just adapts in different ways. And going back to what you said before, it is kind of an expense for a lot of people. And that's something that I wish a lot of more clinics and exercise centers would take on. Maybe once this pandemic is alleviated a little bit, then we can think about like devoting some resources to building some of these centers in every major city and in every major clinic, or attached to every clinic as well. I think should be a center like this. And it's something that we might be trying to build here in Toronto as well, as part of an integrative movement clinic that is developing here. But it should be something that all patients have access to without much expense, ideally, involved.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such a key part of, wellness, I think, for our patients. And certainly, it's been a push, I think, by folks like Bas Bloem to have patients meet with a physical therapist at diagnosis and get, sort of a trajectory for incorporating exercise. And I think we all believe largely as doctors now that, and it took a while, that exercise is medicine. So I think it is part and parcel, just like we would offer people a prescription and coverage for their pills. I think that we have to figure out ways to offer something to help with wellness from an exercise perspective too. So
yeah, and by the way, if anyone here is in Toronto or has the means or somehow, once all this pandemic stuff is over, what I'd like to do is transfer all of this equipment that I've got here to a public space so that other people can try and use these things. So if anyone knows of any spaces here in Toronto that might be able to house something like this, please reach out and let me know.
That's so sweet. Amazing. I love that. So I don't know, Dave Koch, I don't know how to pronounce it. Sorry, is a physical therapist who's been talking about some various planes in which to move. Maybe we can, Andrea, find him and maybe he can speak a little bit because other people are asking that question. And then Hugh has been relentless with his questions here, even though I know you guys are friends, but I think he wants to help get the word out of how great exercise is. So does the workout use up your energy, or do you have more energy after you exercise, Ben?
I definitely feel better. I definitely feel more happy, but you are tired at the end of it. And there are some occasions where it feels like it's pumping through the levodopa a little bit faster as well. Sometimes I take a little bit more levodopa before a workout, just so I can make sure that if I want to be on through that workout, so that I can extend it throughout the workout. But yeah, for those who deal with fatigue, and this is not something that I have a lot of experience with, I think Hugh has a little bit more. There might be a whole different set of exercises that work for them. So that's why the brain gym, whatever it may be for in each different space, has to be able to adapt to each person's particular needs and each person's particular scenario.
And then somebody asked, does the time of day matter for which exercise you pick, or is there a certain time of day, and how many hours of the day do you actually exercise as well, is the question.
So I try to shoot for at least 90 minutes a day in total. Not every day I'm successful at that. Some days I don't do any at all. Some days I do a little bit more, but I try to do at least 90 minutes. And yeah, the time of the day matters. If I am able to wake up in the morning and exercise, then I try to do exercises that just like kind of loosen me up a little bit. So that would be more yoga and like that rolling thing that you saw there. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, David, the physical therapist who's been talking about multiplanar movement. If you could tell us what you mean by that, and if you don't mind coming on camera and speaking, that would be great.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
You can tell us who you are and what your background is for a second, and then just tell us
Well,
about.
my name's Dave Cook. I'm a physical therapist in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was diagnosed in 2017. Really important that we do 3 planes of motion, that you hit the end ranges. You need to get those proprioceptors initiated, through movement. 3 planes of motion: sagittal, frontal, and transverse planes. The sagittal plane runs through our body this way. Our frontal plane is through the body this way, and transverse plane goes through the body this way. You definitely want to work all 3. Unfortunately, a lot of times people skip 1 or 2 of those planes. A lot of them are all sagittal plane that people do. Sometimes they'll do some frontal plane going side to side, but rarely do we get a whole bunch. And there's endless number of exercises you can do. You don't need, I'm out in my gym right now, but you don't need all this equipment. I got rid of a whole bunch of my equipment, going through and doing functional stuff. Make sure it's functional. And every person is an individual and should have someone assess them for where their limitations are. If I go into a protocol type of a treatment, I'm going to get the same treatment that someone 20 years older than me, much more involved, is going to get. You want some individualized stuff directed. So
customization, and then trying to do the 3 planes of movement, which you just showed us. Could you show us, so the plane that you said we do the least in, maybe could you, because we can see you, we see your whole body. If you could just show us maybe an exercise or 2 that, yeah, we can see you now. Go ahead.
Well, your transverse plane would be this motion. And you can vary these, you can go high and low, you can vary the transverse plane. You can 3D pretty much anything, jumping jacks. Okay, getting your transverse plane, frontal plane, sagittal plane, those kind of things. But you can do that with push-ups. You vary your positions. You can do it with, there's millions of ways to do exercises, and then take them and use your imagination to make those 3D. Make them so that they're in all 3 planes of motion.
Great. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. That was really lucky that you're on and you could teach us that. Hughes asked about also trying to mentally load things. I saw, Ben, that you were doing a couple of things where you mixed it up, where you were doing, or cognitive loading. So you're doing, one thing with your feet with that dome thing, the balancing, and then you started doing the ball. Can you tell us about why you did that, Ben? Thanks so much.
And I saw somebody asked about juggling as well, if I'd ever taken up juggling.
Yeah.
It's something I want to try in the future. But what I found is that if you just kind of distract your brain in some ways by doing 2 things at once, you can in some ways overcome some of the things that impede you from sometimes doing some of the things that might be more difficult otherwise. But you want to challenge your brain as often as you can. And what I found actually to be even more important is novelty. Doing new things constantly. Like if you do the same routine day in, day out, it can get a little stagnant. It can be a little bit boring. And I think it just kind of calcifies your brain to some degree. You want to be constantly challenging yourself with new experiences, new ways of moving, new motions, new exercises. So try everything to some degree anyways, as much as you can, and mix it up and do all sorts of things that, even though it might look awkward and might look weird, in the end, it will probably help you to one degree or another.
Yeah. I think, and I think it'll just sustain you, right? If you do exactly the same cook. So I think the customization, not just for the individual patient, and also possibly the person at the stage in which they're at, and if they have any other coexisting medical issues. Some of our patients have maybe a knee issue or an injury or a bad back or whatever. So I think it is helpful to get a physical therapist to at least see people at least one time to kind of see what you're entering some of these exercises in with. And certainly, if someone's everyone is different. So, so I think we want to get a sense of safety and that sort of meeting you where you are. But then also, Ben, you've explained very beautifully that, depending on your medication, the state of the medicine in your body, kind of how you're feeling, what your mental state is at the time, maybe the time of day, if you've just eaten a heavy meal, what your blood pressure might be doing, if it's a hot day, I think all of these things are really sort of can feed back into what might be the ideal thing for you. And I think there's been some questions here about, what's the best exercise for Parkinson's patients and whether cardio is part of that. And I think we've had a number of speakers, and we'll refer people back. Maybe we can link some of the other videos. We had Becky Farley on. There's been a lot about the power approach, and she's, I'm a huge fan of hers. Julie Hirschberg came on. We've had some of the physical therapy gang from the University of Florida. So we would sort of have people check in with those videos. We had Giselle Petzinger come on, Hubert Fernandez. I think we've had a lot of different speakers speaking about the benefits of exercise, and we'll try to link those, and I think there's tremendous research out there. Certainly, I think many people, would say that some cardio would be definitely important if you can get about 30 minutes at least and try to get to where you're somewhat breathless. It's hard for you to talk, but not pushing all the way where you've just sort of completely spent all your energy and can't function at all afterwards. So there's a sort of maybe 80% kind of sense of where you should be in different protocols that are out there. But I think mixing it up and mixing in sort of, you talked, Ben, you showed us some balance, you showed us some mind body sorts of approaches just in what you said earlier. The stretching, absolutely, I think is important. And then certainly you showed us some cardio, and then, the sort of modifying things where you've got, a little bit tougher things that you're sort of modifying and trying to sort of take the brain that may be, really good at something if you do the same exercise every day, and then maybe close your eyes, maybe, try it on one foot if you're doing a yoga or something, or do it in a corner, try to mix it up a little bit so that you're kind of adding novelty, adding constant sort of brain flexibility kind of exercises is also, I think, really, really key, because it's so important. Dual tasking, right? That's what it is. So, and I think, whatever speaks to you. So I think, we just want people to do what they love. I'm a big yoga proponent, but, not everyone's going to do yoga. It might be for some, just walking and getting some cardio out in nature, I think is important. Some people, it might be more interactive, like ping pong people are writing. If you can exercise with your spouse, that's great. People are saying that they're doing some of that. Dancing, people are writing about, so all kinds of things. But I think, mixing it up, and what the best exercise for you is the exercise that you're going to do, is what some of my colleagues say. So whatever makes you actually get up and do it every day is sort of the best thing. And I think customization is absolutely key. So we're not going to tell you anything on this series that's going to be cookie cutter. It's going to require you to sort of probably think about what you're dealing with and kind of customize it. So
yeah, and one thing I would add to all of that is that the brain gym, the concept behind it, and I think something that's important, is that it's not all about exercise. I mean, there are different ways that you can train your mind, different ways that you can try to activate neuroplasticity and try to do things. One thing that I picked up, so I last played the guitar when I was like 12 years old or something like that. So I bought this thing earlier on, and I tried to learn a few songs, and I tried to just learn a few patterns to it. I can't really do it right now. But this has helped me activate a lot of times. There's times when I'm off where I can just keep plucking at these guitar strings, and it opens up my hand a little bit and relaxes some of the nerves in my arm as well, and then just kind of cascades through the body. So just picking up new exercises, learning new drills, learning new tasks, doesn't have to just be exercise based. It really like transfers to many different parts of life and to what we are all trying to do here.
That's amazing. Hugh, are you on? Maybe you could talk for 2 minutes, because we're almost at the end here, and I want Ben to say something inspirational to all of us. But maybe you could just, I know you're very close to Ben and have been a proponent of his brain gym. Maybe you could just tell us sort of what any other added things that you want to say. Can we find you?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, that's a good
Yeah.
hairdo. I haven't seen you in a while, Hugh. That's
yeah, it's great to see you, Indu. Ben is a great pioneer in these things, and also he's building on a lot that he's learned from other people with Parkinson's disease who've been around a long while, of various ages. And so it's not just for young people, it's for older people. We have people like Pam Quinn in New York who works with people who are mostly sitting down, for that matter. And so, and it's the whole thing. and living well with your movement disorder, your neurological condition. And so thank you to Ben for everything that you do on this stuff. It's fabulous. And just folks, think about how well you do feel when you're up and at 'em and doing stuff versus when you're not. And then you get to pick.
Great, thanks you. So Ben, I think we have about probably like 1 minute left. So I want to give you the last word on inspiring us, and then I'll hand it back to the gang here at PMD Alliance. But you're such an inspiration, and we'll try to host some things. And thanks to you for joining us as well, and always, lovely to see you. So Brain Fables is the book. I am like all over the place. I think I said Brain Matters. I don't even know. I think I read Brain Matters. Was that a book by somebody else? I can't even remember, but there you go. Brain Fables. I've been reading a lot of interesting things. So Ben, what is your last sort of, inspirational quote of today? And then we'll have you, on to co-host some other things moving forward as well.
Okay, so one of the most inspiring things I've learned on this journey, again, I come back to the science and to the biology as well, because I just find it endlessly fascinating. But there's one story in biology that when I first heard about it, I couldn't really believe it, to be honest. I thought it was something that the scientists had gotten wrong, but it turns out to be entirely true. And that's inside each of your dopamine producing cells, there's these little creatures called mitochondria. And they very much are their own unique living thing. And the story of mitochondria is really fascinating. So back in the primordial soup that was Earth, when life was just taking hold, they were their own separate creature that was floating around. And at that time, our cells were floating as well. And somehow they met each other and they connected and they formed this symbiotic relationship that has allowed life to flourish and allowed all of us to be where we are. And that I think it shows the importance of connection, the importance that life is not meant to be lived in isolation. We need to do all that we can to work together with one another. And going back to those dopamine producing neurons as well, inside each one of them is 2 million of those mitochondria that act as kind of a hive mind. This is something I learned from a professor at McGill. So they act in unison to one another. So somehow, some way, through time and space, they all communicate with one another, and they all are part of the same ecosystem. And I think that's something that we as people with Parkinson's need to kind of try to imitate in some sense. I think all of us, even though we're all in different parts of the world and we're all living our own different lives, we're all connected by this disease and we're all connected by our shared experience. And I think we all need to try and do as much as we can to support each other and to be there for one another. So as Indu said at the beginning, if you need to reach out at any time to people, don't hesitate to do so. It really can make the whole difference in life. And do what you can to be there for others as well, and to enjoy life to the fullest degree possible.
That's so beautiful. I love that. We're like all resonating, like there's like an energetic kind of like a web of people, or the primordial soup of the mitochondria. That's us, I guess, right? And then we're kind of coming together to make dopamine or something. I don't know. We'll have to think about that a little bit, but I love that. That's such a beautiful analogy. And I think that sort of really speaks to what the purpose of this kind of support group started as, just a virtual sort of like, let's keep the ball rolling. Let's keep the dream going, dream alive. And it started just with LA and a couple of folks here, and the PMD Alliance, was kind enough to get the word out there. But I think we're really sort of starting to connect and inspire each other. And, here we are 9 months later. So definitely want to get your feedback on what you want to sort of hear and how we can keep this connection going. And I think it is all about connection. So I think that'll be the word that I will try to leave you with today. And thank you so much, Ben, and Hugh, and everyone else for kind of weighing in. And we'll look forward to the next few of these talks in the series and hosting with you, Ben. And thanks, PMD Alliance. I'll pass it back to you.
Well, let's show our gratitude for Dr. Subramanian and Ben with a goodbye wave. We'll all reach out and feel that connection across our primordial soup. I love that. Thanks for joining, everyone. Great ideas. I think we're going to compile all of the great ideas that you guys shared and get it out, because those are some great tips and hacks out there. Yes. So, have a great afternoon and evening, everyone. Bye-bye now.